One of the most anticipated films of 2026, Project Hail Mary, is here. I have been looking forward to this adaptation for the past 5 years, ever since the novel came out back in 2021. And seeing this movie in IMAX on that giant screen was an unforgettable experience. I had so much fun. Our protagonist, Ryland, wakes up on a spaceship alone and can't remember who he is or why he's there. In the novel, it takes him a while to even figure out that he's on a spaceship. He has no idea what's going on. As his memories slowly begin to come back, he realizes he is on a last chance mission to save humanity, but he soon finds out he may not have to do this alone after all. Here's what I loved about Andy Weir's book and the movie. It has that winning combination of being entertaining and having a lot of heart. We're having fun with the characters, even if the stakes are extremely high and the circumstances are pretty dire. But there is a genuine emotional core to all of this, and the friendship at the center of it is so heartwarming. I do want to get into some specifics and spoilers, but first, let's talk spoiler-free. Here is why Project Hail Mary works and why you should see it on the biggest screen possible. First of all, it's a gorgeous-looking sci-fi blockbuster, and the way the filmmakers brought the book setting to life is astonishing. This is the case of a $200 million movie actually looking like a $200 million movie. Greg Fraser is the cinematographer here, the man behind 2 Dune movies, The Batman, The Creator, Rogue One, Zero Dark 30. He knows how to make a film look great, especially when it comes to sci-fi. Through his stunning images, you feel the vastness and loneliness of space, and it looks so vivid and so cinematic. This works particularly well in contrast to the scenes that happen on Earth in flashbacks, and those have a completely different feel to them. There's also a different aspect ratio involved, with the Earth scenes being the widescreen we're used to, kind of making them feel a little bit more crammed, a little bit more chaotic, and the space scenes going full IMAX, which adds to the effect. It's beautiful, it's epic, and that's why, as an experience, it's a must-watch on the big screen. But gorgeous visuals alone don't make a great movie, and none of this would feel meaningful without the central friendship of Project Hail Mary. If you've seen the trailers or you've read the book, you know this is a first contact story, and the large portion of this movie is dedicated to Ryland and the alien he names Rocky, figuring out how to communicate, learning about each other, learning to work together. The friendship that develops between the two of them is so sweet and has so much heart. The two of them are just so lovable. At the end of the day, that is what makes this film and what makes this story. You might be coming in for a sci-fi blockbuster, but what you're staying for are Ryland and Rocky and their priceless interactions. Rocky in particular is a show stealer, and I've said this in my review of the novel, but this applies for the movie as well. I love that they went for this really weird design for this alien that doesn't resemble anything humanoid. I'm not going to lie, I was worried about his portrayal in the film because this story does not work without Rocky, and if he didn't feel like a distinct creature, this would have fallen apart really quickly. Thankfully, the movie nailed it. Rocky was perfect. All of the interactions were great. I can't even imagine the amount of work it took to bring this adorable alien to life. Whatever magical blend of animatronics, CGI, and puppeteering happened here, he just feels real. It is insane. Ryan Gosling fits his role really well too. I think his personality matches with Ryland very well. He has great comedic timing. He knows how to be that reluctant hero while still being very likable, and his emotions feel genuine. I wouldn't go as far as to say this is my favorite Gosling performance, but that has nothing to do with him doing something wrong. I think he's great here. There just are other performances of his and characters that he has worked on that I think are better and more interesting. That actually is something I would like to point out. Ryland's character arc in the novel felt more fleshed out and more compelling. And some of that comes down to film and literature being different mediums, with the book just having more room for development, especially because of how much inner monologue is included in the novel. But some of the writing in the film did feel like it was keeping certain things on the lighter side. At the same time, it's interesting that as beautiful as the score is, it's a great score, there were a few moments when I felt like the score was telling me how I should feel. I was noticing the music in a way that felt a bit overbearing, like it wanted me to feel something with or for Ryland when I wasn't fully there emotionally. And I think that does go back to keeping his character arc on the lighter side. Surprisingly, the standout performance for me was Sandra Hüller as Eva Stratt. I mean, unsurprising that Hüller was fantastic, but surprising because I loved and understood her character in the movie so much more than I did in the novel. That was definitely an improvement. A big part of it is how great she is with micro expressions and how much you can tell is going on underneath the version of her she's presenting to the world. I mean, that's impressive acting to me, playing a character who is convincingly reserved and cold on the surface, but still letting the audience know there's a lot more going on underneath and being able to convey what those feelings are. No notes. Look, this is a really easy movie to like and a really easy movie to recommend because it's popcorn sci-fi about friendship and saving the world. Who doesn't like a movie about friendship? What kind of monster are you? The main reason I can see someone not enjoying this movie is just not vibing with the humor. Like, if you thought the humor in The Martian was annoying, you're probably going to feel the same way here because personality-wise, Ryland and Mark feel pretty close, and they're written by the same author. I can also see an argument for Project Hail Mary feeling a little too long, partly because there are some sections in the middle that feel like they could move along, but mainly because there is a point in this movie where it really sells you on its ending. It really takes its time to convince you that this is the ending of the movie, but it's not, and there's more movie happening. To me, this felt like a 2.5-hour film, which is what it is, and that isn't a negative. The pacing felt appropriate. It's a long movie, but it's a satisfying long movie. Yes, it has some science info dumps, but believe me when I say they are pretty minimal compared to the novel, and the flashbacks have been trimmed as well. Are there things from the novel that I, as a book reader and a fan of this novel, would have loved to see on screen? Yes, and a lot of them have to do with the second half of the film, but overall, I think this is about as good and as balanced of an adaptation as we could have gotten, especially compared to so many unfortunate adaptations that we've seen recently. It's not an easy novel to condense into a movie. There's a lot of inner monologue, which is awkward to see unless you're reading it. It's heavy on scientific explanations. There's a lot of backstory told through flashbacks. There are a lot of details to cover, and Drew Goddard handles it really well. Although I still do have some minor issues with some of the writing choices. I already mentioned Ryland's character, but there also were some specific bits of dialogue that felt like they were written for the second screen crowd. What I mean is, the characters will spend an entire scene discussing something, or we will watch something unfold, making it abundantly clear what is going on, and then a character will take a sentence or two to summarize everything in a way that feels very TLDR. At one point, this even happened when Ryland was talking to himself, which was just awkward. And not to get into the whole discussion of how this is Amazon and movies are being written with the whole second screen thing in mind these days, but when it's this blatant, I find it a bit depressing, even though credit where credit is due. Compared to a lot of the recent movies, this is pretty minor of an issue in this one. That being said, Project Hail Mary is great. I had an amazing time. I laughed. I cried, I was stressed even though I knew how the story was going to unfold. I loved so much about this film, the way they captured the characters, the way they balanced the story and the science, the way they nailed the tone of the novel, the way they visualized the sci-fi elements. It's a stunning looking film about friendship, about hope, about coming together, about believing in yourself and others believing in you, even when you don't. It's epic, feel-good sci-fi, and I just really appreciate that this film exists. I'm a little on the fence about the rating. I keep going back and forth between an 8 and a 9 out of 10. I need to see it again to be sure, so for now, I'm keeping it at an 8, but keep an eye on my Letterboxd for a rewatch and a potential upgrade to that rating. It's a crowd pleaser, it's very rewatchable, it's charming and heartfelt, and at the moment, easily the best film of the year. We're only in March, so I don't know how long it's going to last at the top for me, but at the moment, I'm feeling pretty great about it, and I cannot wait to see it again. But let's get into some spoilers. I want to talk about some specifics. I want to talk about the comparisons with Interstellar. I want to talk about the ending. So, if you haven't seen Project Hail Mary, this is your cue to leave, go watch the movie, and then come back to discuss it with the rest of us. I definitely left this movie on a high, and as much as I love dark and brooding sci-fi that can hit you emotionally and deliver when it comes to gravitas, it was nice to see a hopeful, optimistic story for a change. And what I find interesting is that the main criticism that I've seen about this film so far has to do with the movie being lighthearted and having as much humor as it does. Book readers know that there is so much more humor that got left out of this film, but I do get where people are coming from a bit, because there definitely are plenty of scenes when the filmmakers really lean into the humor, but rarely do they balance it out with leaning into the more serious moments. It wasn't until the scene where Rocky tells Ryland that he has enough fuel for both of them to get home that I actually cried, which was surprising. The book definitely got me emotional a few times before that. I do think they messed up with the ending a little bit though. They actually made me nervous that they were changing the ending because of how much they dragged out the goodbye between Ryland and Rocky, spending almost no time on the contaminated astrophage, which is a much bigger deal and a much bigger source of drama in the novel. They spend all this time convincing you that this is the end of the movie, that the two of them part ways and everything is great, and then they cram a big chunk of the novel in about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, which doesn't even give Ryland's decision to save his friend over going back to Earth enough room to breathe and land emotionally. This is a big decision that shows huge character growth, and I don't think the film really conveys how much of a risk this is because he finds Rocky so easily. It made the movie feel like maybe it should have ended at that previous scene, which is not the best thing for the story. The actual ending with Ryland choosing to stay on Erid and teaching the Iridian kids science is perfect. But that false ending feels so grand that it makes the real ending feel like an afterthought. What I did love, though, is that the movie had the restraint to not make Ryland a hero and actually stuck to the book version of him being forced into this suicide mission. I was worried they were going to cut that considering how light they were keeping everything else, and it would have been a very easy thing to cut. Even if it didn't feel as perception changing and character changing as it did in the novel, because again, not enough room to breathe, it's still such an important piece of Ryland's character arc and it humanizes him so much. Now, as for the Interstellar of it all, I think the comparison is misleading some people. In my book review years ago, I described it as Interstellar meets The Martian, but with amnesia. And the Martian element of this is so important. The humor and the lighthearted nature of Project Hail Mary is kind of the main event here, and Ryland is supposed to be that regular guy who is not living up to his potential, who's nerdy and silly and lonely, and he has let his past failures make him feel like he shouldn't really try for anything more than what he has. He doesn't step up because he's afraid to fail again, and because he doesn't see himself as the person who can step up. And like I mentioned earlier, this does hit harder in the novel because you really see him grow more and more confident on his mission, believing he's the hero, he's the guy who wasn't afraid to do the right thing. And the way the revelation that he had to essentially be knocked out to be put on the spaceship crushes him, facing him with the choice of who he is going to be now that he knows the truth. It's powerful, and it makes every decision that he makes after that for the rest of the book so much more important and so much more impactful. This really affected me both times I've read the book, and I wish it had the same impact in the film. It probably would have given the people who were looking for more gravitas and more character depth exactly what they were looking for, and it would have balanced out the humor better. Back to Interstellar though. Look, Interstellar is one of my all-time favorite films, and I do think that the early reviews comparing it to Interstellar may have set the wrong expectations. There are some similarities when it comes to the story, but Project Hail Mary does things very differently. The Martian is a much closer comparison because of the tone and because of the humor. Although, even in that comparison, Project Hail Mary is more lighthearted, so you cannot just bring up Interstellar without saying that the tone is entirely different. If you're going into this film expecting Interstellar, it is going to be jarring because you're going to be looking for a completely different kind of impact. Does that mean that one way of doing things is better than the other? No, it's just personal preference. For me, The Martian, Interstellar, Arrival, if we want a First Contact example, all movies that I love and that I would prefer over Project Hail Mary as much as I enjoyed this film. But I can easily see how for a lot of people, Project Hail Mary is more relatable and more rewatchable and more enjoyable. I will say I did think it was an interesting choice to make the alien ship look like the Tesseract from Interstellar, and that did not help the comparisons at all. But my point is that when I hear people say things like, there is a better version of this movie and it's Interstellar, or that this is the Marvel version of Interstellar, I think it's a bit silly and not entirely fair. Ultimately, I wouldn't recommend them as interchangeable movies, and both have a reason to exist. Quality, feel-good sci-fi, which is what Project Hail Mary is just as valid as other sci-fi. And what's even crazier is that it's okay to enjoy both. You don't have to, but there's no moral superiority in saying one is better than the other or that you prefer one to the other. It's a story about two completely different species learning to understand each other, learning to do better, and coming together to solve the bigger problem. I'd say we need stories like this. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you're doing great. Let me know what you think about Project Hail Mary, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.